My crew is big and it keeps getting bigger. That's 'cause Jesus Christ is my...
Hello and welcome to Change Talk.
You're gonna burn.
What did you just say? Who have you been talking to?
How does it feel knowing that there's an itch that you just can't scratch?
All right, I've had enough of this. I know exactly who you are. You're the one that broke into my medicine cabinet. Man, why can't I get a normal stalker? The identity of the Archangel Michael has served as a fascinating point of convergence with biblical scholars, Adventist theologians, and students of the Urantia book alike. It's also where I find the most critics when it comes to people that believe that the Holy Bible is a document that is 100% accurate. To understand whether Jesus is truly the Archangel Michael, we must first align support for such a conclusion through a narrative journey through scripture, history, and modern revelation. Despite references to Michael in the Bible being indicative of fighting against the dragon, fighting against spiritual powers, and disputing the devil over the body of Moses, all of these references can be reframed as a powerful, loving universe sovereign who is the ultimate leader of angelic forces and not necessarily a specific warrior of any kind. This exploration requires us to look beyond the surface of nomenclature and dive into the functional roles, titles, and cosmic responsibilities assigned to this figure. By weaving together the linguistic threads of the Hebrew and Greek scriptures with the systematic theology of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we can build a bridge to the expansive cosmology presented in the Urantia book. The biblical foundation, the Prince of the People. The journey begins in the Old Testament, specifically within the apocalyptic visions of the prophet Daniel. Here, Michael is introduced not merely as a high-ranking celestial entity, but as the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. Located in Daniel 12:1. In the 10th chapter of Daniel, Michael is described as one of the chief princes who comes to assist a lesser messenger in a spiritual conflict. While some interpret, quote-unquote, one of, to imply Michael is just one among many equals, a closer look at the Hebrew text suggests a unique status. The term prince, sar, is frequently used in the Bible to denote a ruler or commander, and in the context of Daniel's visions, it often points toward a messianic figure. It often is synonymous with a leader, governor, chief, prince, or anyone who exercises authority. However, what if Prince was just a reference to Michael's previous title and not some mysterious angelic warrior? When we move deeper towards Daniel 12, the language becomes even more pointed. Michael is said to, quote-unquote, stand up at the time of the end. In the prophetic vernacular of the Old Testament, for a king or prince to, quote-unquote, stand up signifies the commencement of their reign or the execution of their judgment. If Michael is the one who stands up to deliver God's people during the greatest time of trouble the world has ever known, his role would then mirror the role of Christ as a savior and deliverer, or more plainly, a universe prince ready to become our universe sovereign. That is, of course, if we follow the same traditions as planetary princes who become planetary sovereigns in the Urantia book. When it comes to the Seventh-day Adventist theology, they emphasize that no created angel has the authority to deliver God's people in a judicial or redemptive sense. Only the Son of God holds the keys to life and death. The linguistic connection deepens when we consider the name Michael itself. In Hebrew, Michael translates to a question: who is like God? While some see this as a humble inquiry from a subordinate, Adventist and Urantia line perspectives view it quite literally as a title of office. It is a rhetorical affirmation of his divinity, since of course we know that to see the Son is to have seen the Father. If Christ is the expressed image of the Father's person, then he is one of the few beings in the universe who can truly describe that experience. He is the one who is like God, because he is a form of the eternal Son and the universal Father in the flesh. This name then serves as his warrior name, or his title when acting in the capacity of the commander of the heavenly hosts. In the Urantia book, located in 33:4.6, Jesus' firstborn son, Gabriel, happens to be the chief of the armies of heaven. Consequently, if Gabriel reports to his father Jesus, then it's pretty obvious where the book stops in this situation. Woo! Did you get a whiff of that? Yeah, you did. It smells like facts. The voice of the archangel and the resurrection. A pivotal piece of likely evidence for the Michael Christ identity is found in the New Testament, specifically in Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians. Paul writes that when the Lord descends from heaven, he will do so with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God. The logic here is straightforward but profound. If Christ descends and speaks with the voice of an archangel, it strongly implies that the voice is his own. In the Gospel of John, Jesus declares in John 5:28 that the hour is coming in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice and come forth. If the dead are raised by the voice of the Son of God, and Paul states they have risen by the voice of an archangel, the identity of the speaker becomes crystal clear. Now, as a brief side note, I'm not fully accrediting Paul's statements here as being divinely inspired, with Paul being greatly influenced by mysticism of the time and having very little exposure to Christ Michael themselves. I believe Paul's perspective likely has the least amount of weight in today's video. For those of you that are not privy to the facts of the Urantia book, it was Jesus' voice that raised the souls of the dead in book 189. Jesus states in 189:3.1, "As my Father has life in himself, so has he given it to the Son to have life in himself. Although I have not yet fully resumed the exercise of universal jurisdiction, this self-imposed limitation does not in any manner restrict the bestowal of life upon my sleeping sons. Let the roll call of the planetary resurrection begin." Then, after the immediate directive was given by Jesus, it was concurred by Gabriel. The title archangel itself is often misunderstood. In Greek, archangelos means chief messenger or head of the angels. It is a singular title. The Bible never speaks of archangels in the plural, but always refers to the archangel. Even angels such as Gabriel and Raphael are referred to as simple angels in the Holy Bible. Now, I know what you're thinking.
But Adam, we call them archangels today,
Don't we? Well, I'm glad you didn't ask that question. It has to do with the non-canonical book of Enoch, where in such a text, we add more archangels such as Uriel, Raguel, Serachiel, not to be confused with the atypical antipsychotic Seroquel, and Ramiel. As a fun fact here, Satael is identified in Book 2 of Enoch, who led the rebellion against God. Just as a general is not merely a soldier, but a commander of soldiers, the archangel is the commander of the angelic hosts. Now, although the Urantia book disputes solitary archangels, with this planet having at least one other archangel assigned to our planet at any given moment, Jesus Christ himself is depicted as creating archangels with the assistance of the universe Mother Spirit. Consequently, the father of this very unique order would most certainly be, at the very least, related to these various advanced seraphic orders of the universe. making Jesus perhaps the archangel if we were to follow the family lineage. This aligns perfectly with the description of the captain of the Lord's hosts, who appeared in Joshua before the walls of Jericho. When Joshua fell down to worship this figure, he was not rebuked, as angels frequently rebuke those who try to worship them in the book of Revelation. Instead, he was told to take off his sandals because he was on holy ground. The same exact command given to Moses at the burning bush. This perhaps solidifies that the captain or chief messenger was none other than a pre-incarnate manifestation of Christ. After all, in the Urantia book, we are indeed permitted to worship our universe sovereign and paradise creator son of God. Now, when it comes to the whole sleeping sons comment that Jesus made in front of Gabriel during our most recent dispensation, now, do you think that such a statement pertained solely to the material sons Adam and Eve, or is that more of an inclusive statement that he made, which included, of course, humanity? Let's just say if such a statement included humanity itself, then that, of course, would have huge implications. The dispute and the war in heaven. But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not himself dare to condemn him for slander, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." The book of Enoch provides another layer of narrative evidence. In Jude 1:9, referring to Michael, it describes Michael, the archangel, contending with the devil over the body of Moses. In this encounter, Michael says, "The Lord rebuke you," although the previous statement in Jude 9 indicates that this being did not dare to condemn him for slander. I find this phrasing extremely odd, given that such phrasing is a pretense without the word may, as in, "May the Lord rebuke you." All right, and just to clarify a quick point for viewers here, the Urantia book does indicate that the person that made these statements was actually a archangel of Michael, right? And of course, the person he was talking to was Lucifer, when it states, in 53:1.2, after speaking about Lucifer being a magnificent being, it states that even the archangel of Michael, at the time of Moses' resurrection, did not bring against him an accusing judgment, but simply said, "The judge rebuke you." Judgment in such matters belongs to the Ancients of Days, the rulers of the super universe. So, of course, this statement pokes some holes in my theory associated with the archangel Michael being Michael of Nebadon. But in this scenario, the archangel is an angel of Michael himself. So just to confuse things just a tad more, that rebuke statement was actually given during the time of Moses' actual resurrection. And that argument associated with whether or not they would resurrect Moses happened before. So in 52:5.5, it indicates that even Moses was not permitted to go over to the other side until the occasion of a special resurrection, the fallen planetary prince, Caligastia, contesting such a deliverance. Meaning that it is possible that the Holy Bible merged these two separate episodes and antagonists, Caligastia and Lucifer, together, indicating that the devil was rebuked during a dispute surrounding the material body of Moses. Consequently, it is still possible that Christ argued with Caligastia over the conditions for the resurrection of Moses. But this is, of course, purely speculation. Actually makes you wonder why Lucifer had to get involved in the first place, and of course received that rebuke statement from that archangel. Although we will never know the level of distortions with this passage, taking such a statement at face value, "The Lord rebuke you," sounds more like an observation rather than an invitation for God to consider the matter. The difference, of course, would point towards one that speaks for God, which, of course, would be Jesus Christ. This phrase is a direct echo of Zechariah 3, where the angel of the Lord, which is a frequent Old Testament term for the pre-incarnate Christ, rebukes Satan in the presence of Joshua, the high priest. By using the same judicial language, Jude links Michael to the divine being, who has the authority to command the adversary. In the Urantia book, 52.5.5 exhibits Caligastia, who is known as the devil, contesting Moses having a special dispensation given his accomplishments. However, in the same passage, it states that he was able to pass to the next Urantia planet upon a special resurrection. So who do we know that has special authority to amend dispensational periods? Which of course would overrule Caligastia, who was our once planetary prince. Furthermore, the Seventh-day Adventist position highlights that the angel of the Lord throughout the Torah possesses the attributes of God. He forgives sins, receives worship, and speaks in the first person as Yahweh. If Michael is an archangel, and the archangel is the chief messenger who appeared to the patriarchs, then Michael is the name used for the second person of the Godhead when he interacts with his created beings in an administrative or military capacity. Since the Eternal Son is channeled through Christ Michael, this statement would be indeed accurate. In fact, expressing prayer, it is immaterial if you visualize our Creator Son Michael as the center of all things, since the spirit gravity circuit leads to the same destination, located in 7.3.3. So in other words, praying directly to Jesus Christ Michael is the same as praying to the Eternal Son. This culminates in Revelation 12, which depicts a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fight against the dragon and his seraphim. The dragon is identified as Satan, the ancient foe. However, when I picture the serpent, I personally do so following the join us or die propaganda, representative of the rebellious traitors of the Lucifer Rebellion, rather than Benjamin Franklin trying to win political support for the eventual Revolutionary War. What's fascinating about this image is that it was based on a superstition that if a snake was cut into pieces and the pieces were put together before sunset, the snake would be resurrected. Could the snake, serpent, or dragon be 3 or more characters rather than a simple person? In 53.5.6, we learn that the dragon image was in reference to Lucifer, Satan, and the apostate princes, which of course included our very own Caligastia. Could John the Revelator be doing a head count here when we read the following description in 12.3 of Revelation? Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns on its heads. Based on the high level of distortion in the book of Revelation, we can only speculate. I would simply guess that there were 7 architect princes that joined the Lucifer cause, out of the 37 planets who faced rebellion. In the narrative arc of the Great Controversy, a central theme in Adventist theology, the primary antagonist of Satan is, of course, Jesus Christ. It was Christ who was challenged in the heavenly courts, Christ who defeated Satan at the cross, and Christ who eventually casts him into the lake of fire, not to torment this wayward spirit, but to obliterate him. To suggest that Michael is a separate created angel who leads the charge against one of the most powerful fallen beings in the universe, while Christ stands on the sidelines, would be inconsistent with the biblical narrative of the seed of the woman in Revelation 12:5, bruising the serpent's head that we can find in Genesis 3:15. Again, Michael is often represented by his son Gabriel in the current court case against Lucifer, found in 53.9.1. So whether in the field or in the celestial courtroom, Michael is the name Christ assumes when he leads the loyal forces of heaven against the rebellion of Lucifer. The Seventh-day Adventist perspective, Ellen G. White and the Great Controversy. The Seventh-day Adventist Church that was established in 1863 by Ellen and her husband James White. Ellen White was considered a prophet for the organization, which is where much of its original doctrine originates. The organization has long maintained that Michael is another name for Jesus Christ. This is not seen as a lowering of Christ to the status of a created angel, but rather an elevation of the title Archangel to its rightful place as the commander of the heavenly host, since Christ Michael has absolute authority over his sovereignty. Ellen G. White, a founding figure of the Adventist movement, wrote extensively on this topic. In her seminal work, The Desire of Ages, and in Patriarchs and Prophets, she uses the names of Michael and Christ interchangeably when describing his pre-incarnate activities and his final victory over evil. White's narrative focuses on the relationship between the Father and the Son. She describes how, before the creation of the world, Christ was the commander of heaven. When Lucifer began his rebellion, he was jealous of the position and authority of Christ. Lucifer's grievance was not against a fellow angel, but against the Son of God himself. Therefore, when the conflict turned into open war, it was Michael, aka Christ, who led the loyal angels in defending the Father's sovereignty. To the Adventist mind, Michael is Christ acting in his capacity as the protector of the law and the defender of the universe. This theological stance provides a necessary bridge to the Urantia book. Adventism establishes the scriptural precedent that a divine being can hold a Michael title without sacrificing his divinity. It breaks the traditional Trinitarian barrier that often insists Michael must be a created being simply because the word angel is attached to his name. By demonstrating that angel is a functional role, known as a messenger, rather than a definition of nature, Adventism prepares the way for a more expansive understanding of Christ's identity across the cosmos. As a fun fact, Dr. William Sadler, the organizer of the Urantia book movement, was indeed a Seventh-day Adventist minister for many years. Critics believe this link influenced the writings of the Urantia book, while believers follow the line of thinking that this made Dr. Sadler a perfect candidate to receive the new, more accurate revelation of Jesus Christ, since he was already halfway there in his theological mindset. The Urantia book, Michael of Nebadon. As we transition into the narrative framework of the Urantia book, the biblical and Adventist foundations find their ultimate fulfillment in a staggering cosmic landscape. In the Urantia book, we learn that our universe is not the only one, and that the Son of God, who incarnated as Jesus of Nazareth, is a creator son of the Order of the Michaels. Specifically, he is Michael of Nebadon, the 611,121st creator son of the Eternal Son and the Universal Father. As a fun fact for those of you that haven't picked up on this, Emmanuel of Salvington, Michael's brother, is also numbered 611,121st of his own unique order, the Union of Days. This revelation does not diminish Jesus. Rather, it provides a logical and expansive context for his divinity and the thoughtful planning of the Master Universe. In the Urantia cosmology, a Michael son is a sovereign creator of a local universe. He is the Word made flesh, the one through whom all things in our sector of space were made. When the Bible refers to Michael as one of the chief princes, the Urantia book provides the context. He is one of many creator sons, each of whom is the only begotten of their respective universe, each having their own personality and unique nature, found in 21:0.1. The Michael name is his primary name of sovereignty. According to the Urantia papers, before a creator son can attain full and supreme sovereignty over their universe, he must complete 7 bestowals in the likeness of his creatures. The incarnation of Jesus on earth, which is also known as Urantia, was the 7th and final bestowal of Michael of Nebadon. By living the life of a mortal human from birth to death, he gained the experiential understanding necessary to rule his universe with perfect mercy and justice, with a full context of reference concerning human capacity for, of course, fallibility. The identity confirmed. When we look at these 3 sources, the Bible, Adventist theology, and the Urantia book, a consistent story emerges. The Bible provides the shadow and the clues. the voice of the archangel, the dispute over Moses, and the once prince, now sovereign of his partial creation. These sources give us the name and the roles of both commander and judge. Seventh-day Adventism provides the early theological bridge, arguing convincingly that these biblical roles can only be filled by a divine being. It identifies Michael as the pre-incarnate Christ, the one who led Israel through the wilderness as the angel of the presence. Could this angel of the presence be indeed the Spirit of truth? Since, after all, Jesus shares in the afflictions of God's people and brings salvation through his Spirit. The figure also most certainly has divine authority to pardon or punish. It anchors the identity of Michael in the person of Jesus, ensuring that the Michael title is understood as a mark of supreme authority rather than a sign of created status. Finally, the Urantia book provides the full light of the narrative. It explains why the name Michael is used and what it represents in the hierarchy of the grand universe. It affirms that Jesus Christ is indeed the Archangel Michael, but clarifies that archangel in its scriptures is a limited human term for a series of beings that includes the Creator Son of the Michael order. It shows that the war in heaven was the local manifestation of the Lucifer rebellion in our specific universe, and that Michael's victory was a prerequisite for his total sovereignty. As a fun fact here, Lucifer was actually wise enough to identify Christ Michael as being his creator father, but was not yet psychologically prepared to see him as a form of God and his rightful ruler, located in 53.3.3. In this light, the theory that Michael is Jesus Christ is not just a speculative doctrine. It is a profound revelation of the nature of the Son of God. It reveals a being who is both a sovereign creator and a humble brother, one who leads the armies of heaven, but also walks the dusty roads of Galilee. Whether we call him the Prince of Daniel, the Archangel of Paul, the Michael of Ellen White, or the Michael of Nebadon, we are speaking of the same transcendent personality, the savior of our world and, of course, sovereign of our universe. After all, he came down to our planet and overcame the evil that once plagued it. A planet numbered 5,342,482,337,666. And consequently, Jesus most certainly overcame the mark of the beast. These facts supports the Urantia position by showing that the Michael identity is the thread that connects the dots of divine activity from the beginning of our universe's history to the final triumph of light over darkness. It transforms Michael from a mysterious celestial officer into our creator, our brother, and our humble sovereign. Thank you again for watching today's video, your continued support, and I'll see you on the next one.